What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a player that has recently become available for trade, and that is David Njoku. Let's get it started. Welcome in, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. Before we get this thing started, I gotta let you guys know about the videos that I put up earlier today. So I put up a couple of skits. The most recent one, I really did enjoy the Zoom one. So if you guys have not watched those because they're not necessarily Lions news, you should go check them out, though. I would really appreciate it if you did, because those are videos that I love to do. Yes, they're not just specifically Lions news, but I love doing them. So they probably will continue. I know the support won't be as high on them, but I love doing them. So I'm gonna continue to mix those in. But now let's talk about some news that could potentially end up being Detroit Lions news. This is David Njoku, the tight end from Cleveland, that is basically available for trade. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, why is this guy available for trade? That on its own is a very big question, because sometimes you just want to stay away from those guys. If someone is available for trade, especially a former first-round pick just in 2017, you're probably like, oh, snap, okay, maybe we should stay away from this guy. Why in the world would that team want to trade him? Well, in this situation, it doesn't seem like the Browns really do want to trade him. They picked up his fifth-year option. It's that David Njoku kind of wants out of Cleveland. He said this has been going on for about a year now.
Love me, let me go.
And if you look at what the Browns did this offseason, I would say they kind of prepared for this, because they brought in Austin Hooper, who was a highly paid tight end they brought in. And then they also brought in another tight end through the draft in Harrison Bryant. I think he was out of Florida Atlantic. So they brought in two new tight ends. And because of that, there's probably not going to be much of a role for David Njoku anyways next season. We'll have to wait and see. Last season, he had to deal with some injuries in 2019, so the Browns were also probably preparing a little bit there as well. 2018, he had a pretty big role for the Cleveland Browns, starting in 14 games. But there is a chance that he could be out of Cleveland and be traded somewhere else. Now, this is very interesting. I know a lot of Lions fans want to hear about this one, just like the Chris Jones one as well. It's a very interesting situation, because a lot of Lions fans want to move Jesse James. They hate the fact that we gave Jesse James as much money as we did. And while I don't think it was necessarily bad for us, we definitely have a big contract locked up with Jesse James, a guy who didn't even have 200 receiving yards last season. But you also have to keep in mind, this guy did only have 27 targets. So there's a lot of things that go into this, right? First off, where would he fit on this team if Detroit Lions want to trade for him? Not what will we give away. We'll get to that in a second. But if you trade for David Njoku, let's look at our tight end group right now. We have TJ Hockenson, who's obviously going to be on the team. He's going to be our number one tight end, who we just drafted recently out of Iowa, the 8th pick in the draft. You have Jesse James, who I said you spent some pretty big money on just recently in free agency. Then you have Isaac Nauta, okay, another draft tight end that you took pretty recently. I think that was the same draft as TJ Hockenson. You also have Hunter Bryant, who you brought in as an undrafted free agent that many people look at as the best undrafted free agent signing. So your tight end group is already pretty deep. I think you have Matt Sogel as well. I don't think he'll make the team, but your tight end group is pretty deep. So if you bring in David Njoku and put him into that, he's probably not going to have much of a role anyways, so it wouldn't make sense. So you're probably going to have to move somebody, and everybody is automatically probably going to point to Jesse James. Now, I don't know if the Detroit Lions will get rid of Jesse James if they did this, because Jesse James has a couple of things. He does a couple of things that maybe David Njoku can't bring to the team. But if the Detroit Lions did bring him in, I know a lot of people will be pointing to moving on from Jesse James. So what would this mean for Detroit Lions? How would they do this? Well, he does have a contract locked up for a few years, and his dead cap is pretty heavy right now. But after the season, his dead cap does drop off about $4 million. So maybe after the season, if the Detroit Lions wanted to move on from Jesse James, they possibly could. They could have a way out to move on from him, and then possibly have a guy like David in there. Because if you did have David Njoku, now you have a very, very young core at the tight end position. Not only do you have TJ Hockenson, who's recent draft pick, you also potentially have Isaac Nauta, potentially Hunter Bryant, potentially David Njoku, right? All these young tight ends. On the offensive line, you already have a pretty young offensive line that's almost all the way locked up for a long time, other than the left tackle position. So you have a lot of, you have a really good core built there. We also have that in the secondary. So Lions could have a really nice young core built for the future and have David Njoku and TJ Hockenson. But the thing is, David Njoku is not a direct replacement for, I would say, play style for Jesse James. If they brought him in, he would probably have to replace a guy like Jesse James, but I don't know if he would be able to do that right away, because they don't have the exact same play style. It really depends on what the Detroit Lions are looking at. So like I said, 2018 was probably his best year. He played in 16 games, 14 games started. We have 56 receptions for 639 yards, 11.4 yards per reception, and a 63.6% catch percentage. I believe that is the highest catch percentage we have out of our, Jesse James, TJ Hockenson. I think that's a higher catch rate than both of those guys. But one problem I already see here is that Jesse James All right, Jesse James only had 27 targets last season. So I don't necessarily know if I'm putting too much into the yards category, because if you're only getting 27 targets, how many yards can you really put up, right? Is that Jesse James' fault? I don't know. They really utilized Jesse James to block a lot last season. So my thought is, if the Detroit Lions do bring in a different tight end to replace him, maybe for cheaper and for a long-term move. I mean, Jesse James is only 26 years old. They're both really young tight ends. So it's not like the Detroit Lions are going really old with Jesse James on their team, right? Jesse James was drafted in 2015, so just a couple of years older, right? So if you look at Jesse James, they really utilized him block. They didn't throw it to him a lot. So can David Njoku play that role for the Detroit Lions? Because I'm assuming it's going to be similar because Darrell Bevell is back here, and I would say maybe. David Njoku doesn't have the height that Jesse James does. Jesse James is 6'8", 250 pounds. David Njoku is 247 pounds, almost the same weight, but he's only 6'4". Now, when I watched him, he was a pretty good blocker, and they utilized him a lot on the edge for blocking to take on edge rushers. And I think he would be very good against, a lot of these NFC North teams that have Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, all these teams with all these edge rushers in the NFC North. That's where I think he would be good for us. But I also think Jesse James is pretty good at that as well, and it just doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet, because 1 year that he was before he came to Detroit, he did have over 400 yards receiving, and last year it was down to just under 200 yards receiving because he didn't get a lot of targets. So my concern is here, will it be a big difference if the Detroit Lions bring in a different tight end, or are we going to see similar stats? There's only one ball to go around. You have a lot of wide receivers. You now have running backs that catch the ball. You still got TJ Hockenson. If you bring in David Njoku, would that really make sense? Yes, it's cheaper. It's a little bit younger, but would it make sense to have a guy that maybe won't get as many targets anyways? Because I think David Njoku is a better pass catcher. All right, he's a little bit more on the athletic side than I would say Jesse James is, but Jesse James is a big guy. He's a big red zone threat. David Njoku kind of reminds me a little bit more of a receiver, almost more of like an Ebron in terms of athletic ability, which kind of brings me to a guy like Hunter Bryant. So if you bring in David Njoku, what would be the point of having a guy like Hunter Bryant? There's a lot that goes into this, right? There's so many question marks. So for me, looking at this, I would say it makes sense if you could somehow, do this, right? You would probably have to keep Jesse James, I'm assuming, for 2020. If you would have to trade for David Njoku this season, you probably have to cut either Isaac Nauta or Hunter Bryant to keep both of those guys on the roster. And then after 2020, you would probably let go of Jesse James or try to trade him away, or you could try to do that as well to any team that would take him, because I don't think the Browns would take Jesse James. I mean, they did say they would like to keep David Njoku, but he wants out, so maybe they would. I don't know. He's got a pretty nice deal on him, so I don't know if anybody would take him. And then all of a sudden, now you have to give away something to get David Njoku. So there's so much that goes into this. Now, simply as a player, I like David Njoku. I was watching him today a lot. He's a pretty good blocker. I wasn't expecting to be that good. They utilized him a lot. They didn't utilize him too much in the full house sets. They played him on the end. They didn't use him as like a fullback. They played him on the end to take on edge rushers, and he was pretty good, even in the pass protection. He does a lot of blocking, man, a lot of blocking. And that run game in Cleveland is really, really good with Nick Chubb. He opens up a lot of holes, does some cross blocks, kind of athletic in that range. So I think he's pretty good there. So I definitely think he would be solid for us, right? I think he would be okay. I wouldn't have any problem. I think David Njoku would be good. The problem is I don't necessarily know where he fits in here with Jesse James, right? That's where I see the problem. Unless the Lions want to keep Jesse James, have David Njoku, and have TJ Hockenson, and then potentially move on from Isaac Nauta, or potentially move on for Hunter Bryant. I don't know. There's so many questions in it. We don't know what we're going to get from Hunter Bryant. We haven't seen him yet. We really don't know too much about Isaac Nauta yet. So there's still a lot of question marks there. I don't know. I really don't know. This is a hard one. So I'm not even going to give you guys an answer here because I don't know. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you guys in the comments decide whether or not the Lions should trade for David Njoku. But there's a lot more that goes into it, right? Because just because you trade for him, now what's his role going to be? I'm concerned. My concern is this. The Lions would trade for David Njoku and he wouldn't have tons of receptions. Maybe he'd get a little bit more than Jesse James, but the problem is Jesse James, again, he had less than 200 yards receiving, and you could say he underperformed. Well, when you only have 27 targets, what are you really going to do with that? Are we really going to target that guy more? Jesse James is 6'8". Some people say he's 6'8". 6'8"? Are you really going to target David more? Like, I just don't know. There may be just not enough balls to go around for everybody. That's the problem I see here. And I definitely think it would be cool to have that young core. I mean, Jesse James ain't old. It'd be kind of cool to have a young core, but I don't think Jesse James is old either, so I don't think it's one of those things where, oh, you keep Jesse, now you got an old guy out there. You don't have Jimmy Graham. It's Jesse James. He's not that old. Jesse James is still a young buck, man. He can still make plays. So I don't know. I really don't know. It would be cheaper for now, probably. But then all of a sudden, you got to try to move Jesse James. I know a lot of people will be on board for that. That's just my concern. I mean, maybe he would. Maybe they would use him more. Maybe they're like, hey, Jesse James, man, he's not good enough to go off routes. I don't know. I just really don't know. But I guess we'll have to wait and see, man. So that's what I got so far. What do you guys think? Personally, I don't think the Lions will do it. But again, I wouldn't be shocked. I don't know if this is a move that takes them over the top, because I just don't know what his role is going to be with the Lions if we had him. So let me know your thoughts, comments below. Would you trade for David Njoku? Thank you, Pat, for watching, and I'm out.